the temperature bar, and one of them means heat. So if you're talking around a topic, you might be in your class saying, this is, we're talking about heat, we're talking about how hot was it, what was the temperature, and those are all extra words that your students will need to understand. Next one was write down a formula for the cuboid. Now, if you were cutting and pasting into Google Translate here, you might have got into trouble because you say it was pretty nasty and I put this in as an image, and obviously you can't cut and paste the text in an image for this one. Next one, hopefully everybody got this one. You had a picture, which was a very useful picture. You had a translation given actually just beside the text as well. The next one was not very common vocabulary. Surveyors might not be a common word for everyone. We had commas instead of decimal points there, so that was a bit tricky. This one I hope everybody got. I'm sure you all recognized a factors question. The key here is if you have a student who needs to translate something, make sure that they're not busy doing their translation while you're doing that example so they actually know what it means. Because if they've seen an example, they don't need the words there. But if they're just too busy typing stuff in, they may not be paying attention to what you're saying. Number 7, the graphic here was completely useless. A picture of a bag did not give anybody any clues about what was going on. So, you know, if you're thinking of putting a clip art in, that was probably not a very good one. Probability question. But then the last one, another probability question, but you had a picture of a red pen, a blue pen, you had text highlighted in red and blue as well. So I hope that was interesting. Some points, more general points you might have found out from this was that editable text is very important. If you can, don't just take a screenshot or a JPEG. If you need to translate something, try to export to PDF or as a Word document. I know OneNote sometimes sticks things in as images if it's in a text box in Word. If you were using a vocabulary list, you might have found it really annoying scrolling up and down to try and find it. So if that can be printed out and separate for your students, you know, or if they have a little, you know, laminated maps into their language, that can be really useful. And also, if you're trying to look at that on a mobile or a tablet compared to a laptop where you're, you know, able to actually see things, I bet that was quite a different experience for a lot of you. Okay, so the next thing was how do we move from text limited maths problems to text heavy maths problems? So what do we mean by this? I mean, if we take an example of if you're teaching some basic algebra, you've done questions like this, your class are rocking it really, really good. So typically in your maths book, they're working through a sheet of it and it goes through about 20 questions on this. And at the bottom of the page, there are like 30 word problems or something. So they're doing this, they're really confident. And the next thing they're hit with is this. Now, I saw this on Facebook a couple of months ago from a teacher in the US, a 4th grade teacher, who was saying, how do I teach this? And my brain just went into meltdown. I was just, I can't. And I saved the graphic, but it took me a number of weeks to work up the courage to actually attempt it. It's not a difficult question, but just looking at it just completely sent me into a tailspin. And I think that's something that can happen, you know, going from thinking real confidence here to, oh my gosh, what we're going to do. So I found this method, which I thought was quite interesting to break it down, which is a 3-tier scaffolding method. So it's like, first of all, working on the maths, and then looking at the words, and then looking at the order of the words. So I'm going to completely ignore the maths because I know you all know the maths, and it'd be a waste of my time to do that. So I'm just going to look at the words. So if you take, for example, a second level problem, so profit equals selling price, take away buying price, and you've done lots of examples and you've stuck in different numbers here and they're happy about the positive and negative values and all this good. You might look at the first part of this. So the selling price was £20. There are 4 ways that I've thought of. I'm sure there are many more, but different ways that can be written. So we have sold, purchased, received, paid, all these different things, different people doing it, and they're all the same thing, which is a fairly heavy kind of text burden. And then again, on the other half of it, the buying price, we've got bought, paid, cost, sold. And you can see as well there that we've got sold on both sides and we've got paid on both sides. So trying to decipher who does what and which applies to each area is quite difficult. But in all these cases, we have the selling price first and the buying price second. So we're just looking at deciphering the words in this one. The next stage is we might change the order of the words around. So you mix it up. So we might have the buying price and the selling price the wrong way around. So obviously this is where we've got to watch out they don't get a negative answer instead of a positive one, or vice versa. Or key information might be taken out of the main sentences. So you have a sentence at the start that says, here's some random information, and then you have to kind of substitute it into the following sentences. So in this case, we work through the maths, then we work through the words, and then we work through the order of the words. Now, I could spend 2 hours going through this, but it's actually a really long task and we don't have a lot of time today. But I have a link at the end where I worked through a couple of different examples, one kind of a personal finance one and one algebra one, so you can kind of see how this might be broken down. This is not something that I would expect anyone to do on a class-by-class basis. It's just completely unrealistic. But if you have students who are just not getting it and you've just got to, you just think, I don't know how to get this, this has actually been very, very useful for me to try and break down not just the maths, but the word element of this as well. So final bit of this is talking about mathematics. And sadly, from my perspective anyway, it's no good to just get 100% in all of your maths tests these days. You have to go in, you have to write an application form with competency-based questions, you have to go into an interview and talk about your competency about this and that and the other. So it's genuinely a real concern. And even for researchers, communication with the public, you know, even if you're, you know, really, really good at maths, you really have to be able to go out there and communicate your ideas with the wider community. So what is typically thought of in this situation is we take our normal everyday blethering voices and we try and get to a point where we can convey succinct, precise meanings using mathematical language. And when we're doing that, sometimes we use a technique called revoicing. So that's to be restating what one of the students has said. And there can be very good reasons to do that. First of all, to model the correct mathematical language. There's no point in letting a faulty pronunciation or just an inaccuracy to persist. So that's quite important. And also, to clarify the language. So if they're not being particularly clear, but you think the rest is going to really foster a discussion with the rest of the class, it's really good to try and repeat that in a way where more people can actually understand it. But there are some problems with correcting students in this way. So if we look first at the natural register, this is more complicated than you would think. This is a whole variety of things. So this is the way you speak at home and to your friends and stuff like that. But as we all know, the way we might speak to our siblings is very different from the way we might speak to a grandparent or someone at the church or a teacher at school. So we all have different registers that we feel more comfortable with, but every child will know that there is a way they speak to one person and a way that they don't speak to someone. So to just say, oh, that isn't for me, that's not true. It's a natural part of our linguistic development. Mathematics register, not a great deal of use for it other than maths class or university interviews or job interviews. There's not a great deal of need for the students on this, but there is an academic element to this. So if we look about getting from one to the other, we have two strands in this. We have academic and mathematical language. Now, if you imagine, say, student one, I'm going to assume that, of course, because all of you are excellent teachers, that the mathematical register here is spot on. They know all their words completely. And I'm going to take here the mathematical register as, say, a level that you want them to get to by the end of the year as a point. Obviously, this is a moving thing as they go through. And imagine student one has an academic register that's here, and maybe this is because their parents have third level education, they are exposed to a lot of language at home, and so they've got a good background knowledge of this. So if you want to get them from there to there, this is great. Revoicing is fantastic. This is a little correction. It won't upset them too much. It's just a bit of fine tuning. If on the other hand, we look at student two, and student two, you've also taught extremely well, and they're great at the math side of things. But student two comes from a different home background, and they have not been exposed to a lot of academic language at all. They are way at the left-hand side of this. And so to get them from there to there, if you use revoicing and try and correct what they've had to say, this can be a problem because it can feel like code switching. Now, code switching is something that's normally talked about in a language context, where you switch between two languages. You might, if you speak French and English, you might switch between one or the other at different points. But it's also used in varieties of language or in conversation. So now I don't know if any of you remember the news before coronavirus hit. It seems like a long time ago, but a couple of years ago there was a range of media programs on this, and it was talking about Black and minority ethnic graduates who were going into the world of work, and they were just feeling completely inauthentic in the workplace. And it wasn't about the jargon of the work, it was just the way that people were chatting in the workplace, and they felt that they were basically acting the whole time, and it was pretty poor. Now, this doesn't have to be about ethnicity. This can be just coming from different sides of Edinburgh. You know, the pattern can be quite different there. So if we want to have people that can own a language and not have this feeling of not belonging, there's a couple of ways we can try and look at that. The first thing is to not assume that this goes one way. It's not natural register bad, mathematical register good. They are both really important to be valued. So to do that, one suggestion I would have is, firstly, ask the students to describe the concept to someone 2 years below them. Now, this is different from asking them to talk about it in class, because if they're talking about it in class, firstly, they're wanting to please you. So they're wanting to mimic whatever you've said. They're also wanting to impress their friends, so they don't want to say anything that might seem that they might be ridiculed for. If they try and if they try and explain it to someone who's 2 years younger, say a bright person, say if they're S3, say a bright S1, how would you explain it? It means that they can strip it down to the conceptual level, which is also really important for meaning making, but also if you can get them to think about someone in their own group, whether that's their friend group or a younger sibling or someone in their street or something, they can own that. They can say, okay, there's no point in me using those languages. I have to talk about, whether it's Pokemon or Fortnite or something, or whatever patois they have, and using their own references to really make meaning in it. And no one's will be the same. So you take away, because they're saying, well, I need to say that to say to somebody else. It's not about them, it's about the other person. And that takes a lot of the emotional worry about trying to explain what something is in your own head. The second bit is describe the concept of someone you wanted to impress. Now, for the older years, that's obvious. That's going to be college interviews or university interviews or something like that. For younger years, you can make a game of it. You can say, Elon Musk has come in and he's got £1 billion, but you've got to be the most, he wants to know who knows this topic the best. You've got to really sound like a scientist here. And so there's a couple of ways you can help them to do that. You can have quite a lot of fun with this. The first one is typically if students are writing something about what they've done. They've done a big experiment. This is a trivial one here. They'll write up what they've done and they say, I had 6 blocks. I took away 2 blocks. I had 4 blocks left. So you can change this, get them to turn it from the active into the passive voice. There were 6 blocks. 2 blocks were taken away. 4 blocks were left. And you might then want to change the language so that we sound a little bit more like scientists on this one. The other thing you can do is develop the academic discussions. So if you're in your class and you say, right, I'm going to get them to discuss this. I've taught them 4 methods for doing this problem. And I want them to go do a problem and then pair up and discuss their answers and stuff. And so you're thinking this will be really useful. We'll get some really deep discussions going on this. But what happens is they pair up and they say, what'd you get? I got 4. I got 4 too. Great. And that's the end of it. And then they just go and chat about whatever they're chatting about. And if they got a different answer, you're like, I got 4. Oh, I got 3. Maria, and then that Maria's the best one in the class. She's the one who they always go to because they know she'll always have the right answer. What did you get? I got 4. Ah, right, okay. And then so what we want to do is to develop some ideas for encouraging this discussion. So we might give them a framework. So if their answers match, we might say, how do we know our answer is correct? Do we think we can explain it? And to have this maybe on the board or as little prompts on a worksheet or something so that they can actually really delve into what they're doing rather than just say, discuss your methods. This can be quite a useful thing. And again, if we've got different answers, it's like, okay, how do we dig deeper into this? What skills do we do? And just giving them that little framework of having that discussion. We can also use sentence frames as well. So giving them, if they don't know how to start a sentence, this can be quite a good way of saying, okay, pick one of these and give me a sentence about what you think, because mostly they just say, I got the same as her, or I think the same. So you can actually try and encourage them to actually give a really useful academic mathematical discussion by having these in your classroom. Now, these could be posters. You might have them around the classroom. You might have them only in English. You might have them in multiple languages. I have them here in Bengali and Spanish. You might have them for English language students as a little crib sheet that they have beside them all the time if they're not sure about how to participate in a discussion. And I have these available for you to download and customize for yourselves if you would like to do that. So that's pretty much all I have to say today. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them. I'll just, yeah, so the on the screen is the little link to it, but I will also just post it in the chat so you can, I'll just type it in here, might be a bit easier to click on, no, that's the one for the breakout room, let's copy that. There you go, that's the link through in the chat now. There's also, in case anyone wants to read more on this, there is also a couple of, there's a book I would recommend, which is really easy to dip into, really light read, but just fascinating on that one, and a research paper as well. Karen, I'm afraid I don't understand what you're asking there, referent person, sorry. So Karen, I don't think it really matters. I think it's whatever is in whatever your goals are, and those ones will change. The examples I've given there are, yes, talking about what you did, but yeah, I think you can talk about what other people have done as well. So don't it just depends on the context, as long as you're getting them talking. And it might be something, depending on the level of your class, that you could switch between and say, okay, I did this, you did, this happened, and it's going from active to passive. The main thing is giving them some building blocks where if they don't know how to start, that they have some way of making a start on what they're going to say. The link in program notes doesn't seem to work. What? Sorry, Kiri Low, what?
It's in the program description where it says collating a variety of content area literacy research. You show how to move literacy from an outlier lesson to the heart of your teaching. It is based on research in the paper embedding.
Oh yes, do you know what? I'll put it in that's usually that tiny URL one. I'll just stick the document in there. So
brilliant, thank you.